let's get to the show, man. Enough bantering. All right, here we go. Welcome to the Lifeonaire show, everyone. My name is Jason Wojo. I'm your host. I'm joined by Polish Peter, my co-host. And on the Lifeonaire show, we help people make more, work less, create a life and business they love. And if you've lost your life somewhere along the journey, we help you get it back. Welcome and thanks for listening. Peter, what's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing great. Now I'm totally concerned about just helping you get out of the midlife crisis that you have
with
going on.
My minivan crisis, right?
Midlife crisis, yeah.
Midlife,
came a little bit late,
dude,
because
most people have a midlife crisis and they go get a sports car. I have a midlife crisis, I get a minivan.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen. So today's episode, Keith Blackborg. Keith is a Lifeonaire student, but super smart guy, super sharp. You can tell just by when you talk to him, I can see like wheels turning. Like this guy has like, gears in his mind that most people don't have. Super intelligent. And he's going to talk with us about this concept of wealth as a business. And when he first mentioned this to me, I was extremely interested and curious about what he meant by that. And so we're to talk about that in this episode.
Yeah, and I had to actually think about it, right? Because my mind doesn't have that many gears, right? But think about it. I want you guys to pause for a second, right? Wealth as a business, right? And really think about that. Like, how does that look like for you in your life, right? And what are you gonna have to put in place, and how are you gonna have to, create it? So this really episode is for you to kind of get listening and start thinking like, okay, how do I create my financial freedom? How do I create my life? And really go and experience that. And he gives some good examples in there.
Yep.
He throws in his, there was like 49 C's, I think, in there.
Yeah. His 49 C checklist.
Yeah. No, but it was like 5 C's, which is actually really good to pay attention to that. And let's get into this. It's
going to be a great episode. Let's jump into it right now. Wealth is a Business with Keith Blackborg. Hey, Keith, welcome to Lifeonaire show, man. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
We are super psyched to have you now. So Peter and I have had a chance to know you for some time here, and for our listeners and our audience who don't know you, Keith, you started off kind of working for one of the big four. You're a CPA, is where you kind of got your start, but you really expanded quite impressively after that. You've worked with high net worth individuals. You've started taking your own knowledge and experience and then turning that into benefits for your clients. And now you and Jessica, your wife, were able to be millionaires and be financially free before the age of 30. Less than 10 years, you guys accomplished incredible things. And now you kind of help other people do this. And you have an incredible journey that now you get to travel and you're living this Lifeonaire lifestyle. And it's just been really, really cool to see this and to learn about what you guys have done. Tell us more about that.
Sure. A few years ago, my wife and I sold a lot of our investments. We transitioned out of active real estate and actively running a business. And we put those into some passive, high return on investment type deals. And that's enabled us to stop working, make work optional. We spent a couple of years traveling around the world. Out of that, we eventually had a son. And who would have thought kids can slow down the pace of life a little bit? So since we've had him, he's about 17 months old now. He's a real joy to us. But it also meant that kind of our pace of life has changed a little bit. So at the end of that journey, I still wanted to work some. So I was like, what's the most fun way I can help others? And that was helping others reach financial freedom.
Man, it's super cool. And I know you do that in a number of different ways. And, when I think of you, you're someone who's, I consider like just a really smart guy who looks at things a little bit differently than the average person. You seem to have some really acute perspectives and insights into things, not only, and I'm not just talking about like tax strategies and investment stuff, but also just the ways that you view certain things. And specifically on this podcast episode, I wanted to get into this. We had this discussion recently about business and wealth, and you said something that really struck me that I want to really focus in on for this podcast, which is looking at in viewing wealth as a business. It's this concept that you mentioned that I really want our listeners to kind of to latch onto and understand more fully. Tell us what that means.
Sure. For many, wealth building is an afterthought. They get so caught up in just doing life in terms of going to sporting events, taking care of kids, going to work, doing business. People get so caught up in trying to make money that they forget about building wealth.
So what is the difference? So explain for us, what's the difference between making money and building wealth?
So making money can be prioritizing your career, building a business, but wealth, the primary goal of building wealth is getting wealth, growing cash flow producing assets.
Okay. So that's how we're describing wealth, I guess, is like your money working for you versus your efforts, your toils and labor towards making money. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. And so tell us, this concept of looking at wealth as a business, that really, it's peculiar to me. I've never heard that before.
So what it does is it means that you organize all the activities in your life to support that business. It means that you're looking at your spending, where you're spending possibly time with other relationships, that in where you spend your money, that the end goal is financial freedom. So you're looking to build these cash flow producing assets. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the goal is to make the most amount of money. It's not saying that money is the most important part of your wealth business. Really, money is just a medium of exchange, and it encompasses it's in every aspect of your life. So by making the wealth goal as the primary focus, at least in terms of your wealth business, making that the primary focus means that all these other activities fall underneath that. You're just recognizing the nature that they support that, and that you're being intentional with your decisions as to how they will affect your wealth goal. Interesting.
And so tell me a little bit more, like when somebody's coming on board with this concept, I'm guessing at some point you have people that are either you mentioned earlier, they're distracted, they're not thinking of wealth, they're thinking of income. What are some of the first things you have them do? Do you have any principles or guidelines or any kind of suggestions that people start to move in this direction may want to grasp onto?
So the first part is just focusing. A lot of people aren't intentional about making wealth that goal. Instead, they're caught up, like I said, in their business or their career. They're just doing stuff. So if your overriding goal is growing equity that produces cash flow, that changes the focus of things, and things now fall in behind that. Also, looking at your habits, being intentional about building financial habits that will help automate your success later. And then also being in a community of other people who are pursuing financial freedom. Most people, I think, would like to have financial freedom. It seems like a good thing to have, but they're just not aware of it. The pattern of people around them is following the traditional path of, we're going to save a lot of assets in our 401k, our IRA, and then hopefully when we reach our 60s, we have enough. But most of those people are focused on building a corporate career or a business, and they never really think that with just a few small changes that they could reach financial freedom in a decade or two.
So do you feel like that model of like the 401k, putting away retirement accounts, is that not really the best way to achieve financial freedom?
I think it can be a tool to get there, but it's not the primary goal. So a lot of people will talk about budgeting, they'll talk about raising income, they'll put money in your 401k. All those are tools, but they're not the primary goal. I think the primary goal needs to be the building equity in cash flow producing assets. And there's a ton of different ways to do that. And maybe budgeting or a 401k can be a part of that, just not the primary goal itself.
What are some of your favorite cash flow producing assets that you often see people do well with?
So just to start, for me, I started off in rental houses. I would occasionally do the flip to grow things larger, and then I moved into commercial property, which is can be hotels, apartments. That's worked really well. And then you can get into some other things that people are less familiar with, like music royalties or oil and gas investments, depending on where things are at. Investing in private businesses. So just a lot of these are more through your private network that you may find these. And so you need to have a system in place on how to bring these deals to you. And that's what I help clients develop, is looking at what their individual skills and experience are and what assets might be a good fit for them. And then I also share some of my deal flow with people as well.
So you mentioned so one of your tips earlier was getting around people that are doing this. So it's not really just from an educational standpoint and a modeling standpoint, but also there's a real, very potential here that you might be doing business with these people too, and sharing on those kinds of things too. Okay. That's fascinating. You know, I can't help but wonder for our average listener who, like, they're just starting out. They're learning the ropes. How does a person know, you know, and by the way, I don't know if there's an answer to this question, but like, for instance, when I first started real estate investing, you know, I had everything thrown at me, like, okay, here's rentals, here's storage, here's flips, here you're going to do sub 2, here you can do lease options. You have Airbnb, like there's an endless assortment apparently, or seemingly, of different kinds of cash flow producing assets. How do you, what kind of advice do you have for somebody who's just started on this journey? Like, how do they find out about what they might like or what's the best for their particular situation? It seems a little daunting.
I think it can easily feel overwhelming for people, especially if they don't have a process to determine what those investments are for them or where they should start. I think so many just aren't aware of how to be intentional with this. So one of the steps in building a wealth plan is I take people that one of the beginning parts is, what are your competitive advantages? What is your network and resources? So if somebody has already built a business, and for me as an accountant, it was easy to jump into investments that supported more analytical style of investing. So a lot of accountants, engineers might jump into more stocks. Or if you're a real gregarious person, then maybe going out and doing deals. So there's this whole process you go through to help get people to narrow down what those fits might be. And then there's just a ton of things out there. So I may provide different suggestions to people. And if they're just starting out and they want to build some wealth, maybe it's buying a duplex, living in half and renting out the other half. And there's a whole bunch of little tricks like that could fit depending on where somebody's at.
But the other thing that you mentioned, I think is important here is how you mentioned skills, right? Looking at people's skills. And I think not everybody can be a real estate guy, right? Not everybody can invest in businesses or in stocks or whatever. So is there anything in regards to the specific person that you look at to say, okay, you should be going in businesses or in real estate, whatever the case may be?
Well, Peter, actually, yeah. I heard something a little different. I heard that you can invest in these things, but you got to know what facets of them, based on your personality and skills, you might want to get into. Is that which? Are we looking at this the same way?
Let's duke it out, Keith. Which one is it?
I think you
and
guys
be careful what you say.
I think you can do both, and part of your vision is knowing how active do you want to be. So I think the absolute best way to create extreme wealth is to create the next Facebook or Microsoft. Now, the chances of most people doing that is unlikely. After that, I think the next best way to create a lot of wealth is being some sort of a syndicator, where you're putting together a real estate deal or a deal like that, where people are investing in you, and then you're able to get a percentage of everybody's money. That does work, but that's not for everybody either. So then after that, I like to just match people up as passives in those deals. So most people talk about 7% as an average rate of return in the stock market. There is a deal I recently sent out to my investor list, my clients, that was just somebody else in my network. It was a 15% preferred rate of return, but it's a development deal, and it's expected to go way above 30%. Passives are capped at earning 30% per year, but that's still a phenomenal ROI, and I'm happy if the developers make more money.
So, okay. So I'm hearing really that someone has to look at their skill set. They have to look at where they are in their life, what their goals are, what their vision is, what their personality traits lend themselves to. So there's really a kind of a mixture of criteria to help guide someone in this direction. And I love some of the examples you gave. Like if you're an analytical kind of person, if you're a spreadsheet numbers kind of person, hey, you may want to look at this kind of thing. If you're more of a people person, if you're someone who enjoys interacting with people, here there are some other things over here that you may want to consider. And so, what kind of diversity do you think that this is something that? Well, first of all, let me back up. Sorry. How long do you think it would take somebody from scratch to reach financial freedom without any prior experience? Is this like a 20, 10 year, 5 year? Yeah. I mean, and I know a lot of it depends on the person.
Let me start by saying, if you live in America, you are wealthy, especially compared to global standards.
Yes.
I think just about anybody living in America has the potential to reach financial freedom by putting some focus into it, but 95+% of Americans never will, because they either don't know how, they don't have the community around it, they don't have the concept of exactly how to do so. I feel like my clientele, I work with accredited investors and business owners. I can take somebody in that has those characteristics, and if they want financial freedom, we can be there in 2 to 5 years, depending on the level of lifestyle, maybe longer. But if you're in that range, by trimming things up, often you can be there instantaneously by trimming down lifestyle. But most don't want to do that, so we build up to maintaining that certain level of lifestyle. And often it's just a matter of connecting people to the kinds of deals that fit them and fit their vision, and how active or inactive they might want to be. If somebody's just starting out, for me, I did it in 10 years, starting from scratch. I didn't come from wealth. My wife definitely didn't come from wealth. We worked together. It did require some effort, but we did it in less than 10 years from the time we graduated college. I think, and part of it was we hit a great real estate market, so that worked out nicely. But I think it's more reasonable and more conservative, 2 to 3 decades. I think most people could get there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so what do you feel like the biggest stumbling stone you've seen in people is? Is it being around the right people? Is it having the right mindset? Is it the focus? Do you see people stumble in one area more than others?
I think the 3 factors for me are focus, habits, and community. You need the focus to make sure you're pursuing it. You need the habits to make it unconscious, where you kind of get swept away, where you're trying to ride a bike uphill with potholes, to with the right habit, you're going downhill, smooth sailing, no potholes. And then just a community, a mastermind centered around a common goal is the most powerful forces you can have. So when you're around a community of people that are doing it, you see them doing it. You can see yourself being like them, and you see what works for them, what doesn't work for them. So you're just learning so much faster by being around a group of people that are also doing it, which is one of the reasons I love the Lifeonaire community. Is you guys are surrounded by vision-focused people who are all pursuing their individual goals, but they're also helping each other out along the way, which I think helps speed everybody up in reaching their goals.
So listen, this is something that's really interesting to me and you mentioned habits. I think this is a really important part of anyone to being financially free or being successful in life. So what are some habits that someone would need to have to be able to get to that financial freedom, you think?
So I think it starts with being a lifestyle awareness, just knowing what it costs. Most people, when they did a study a few years ago, they asked Americans how much their lifestyle cost, and most people thought it cost 20% less than what it actually did. Realizing the true expense of your home. So being intentional about that home, because there's a lot of other factors like your neighbors and stuff that influence other costs. I can talk more about that, but then also just automating your savings, possibly your giving and investing, where there are systems you put in place where things automatically go into certain buckets so that the money is there to invest when you're ready. And you don't notice it so much once it's set up. If you have to remember to move money over or to take certain actions, then that's going to take you longer. But if things are done for you, then the path of least resistance is what most people take. So for most people, the path of least resistance in their wealth is just to continue living life and going whatever they want to do. It's just making those day-to-day decisions, whatever's coming at them. But if you set things up ahead of time where those habits are done for you, then that's where it becomes so much easier.
Keith, one of the things that struck me early on in my journey that I heard relating to habits, and Peter, I know you love mindset stuff, was so I had read somewhere, when you learn to think as an investor first and a consumer second, you make very different choices. Now, I love the idea which you said, Keith, about automation, and I know there are some tools out there that will, hey, the first 10% or 20% of my money every month is going to go to XYZ, whatever that is for you, savings and investment, stock account, IRA, whatever. But looking at every dollar you have as either, I'm going to use this to buy something for myself, or I'm going to use it and save it or invest it and put it towards something else. I kind of think like in the church, we talk about, we have this pyramid, and the top 10% is a tithe, and then it's save, and then it's, spend, whatever's left over. And so I can't help but think there's a similar structure in hierarchy to how you should view any dollar that you make, in alignment with your vision and building this idea of wealth. It seems like that's something that's paramount to this as well.
So I want to just build off that and share that it's important to be intentional with your money. Also, there are other people out there that are living so frugally that they are going without, that it's like trying to live on a diet your entire life. They feel like having a strict budget is holding them back, and they develop this scarcity mindset because they can't spend. They're thinking of all the things they're going without. However, if you can change your mindset to thinking about what your vision is, and you have that of what you want out there, it's not natural. Most people want what's going to what's going to be immediate. So when they're at the bar and they're thinking about having that second or third martini, that's what seems good to them in the moment. They're not thinking about the fact that, well, that $10 drink could grow to an extra $5,000, $10,000 by the time we grow and we were an investor, whatever those numbers work out. That's just not natural for people to think about in that moment. But by people visualizing ahead of time what they want financial freedom to look like, what they have to look forward to, and understand, and actually this is why I like to work with people kinesthetically, what kind of retirement do you want? Because a few decisions here can make the difference between a $3 million net worth when you retire versus a 12. And the lifestyle difference between that a few decades from now is phenomenal. So this is where, if you're not intentional with where you're spending your money or making your wealth business first, every time there's something more important than your wealth growth, like one of these supporting activities, whether it's a nice dinner out, a celebration, a special gift for a special someone, a nice car, people are always going to prioritize the lifestyle stuff over their wealth business, especially if they're not thinking that as their primary focus.
Yeah, that's gold right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, because a lot of times what happens when it comes to the mindset, right? It's what I heard from this, that you were talking about being present in the moment, right? About what you're doing, with the focus being on where you want to go, right? Because a lot of people are so not focused on what they're doing in the moment, like not present to what they're doing in the moment and knowing where they want to go, that they just go about their life. And that's what that wealth kind of escapes them.
Well, it seems like it's a balance, right? So you're not, because you don't want to, like Keith said earlier too, it's not like you want to live like a monk on mac and cheese and ramen noodles your whole life and try to build wealth. Like, that's probably not and remember, Peter, if you remember, we did the interview with Josh Gierak, and he talked about how Spartanish his life style was, in terms of like, he didn't do anything. And so finding that balance, I guess, is something probably like not that easy, but at the same time, it's a trading of what you really want in the future with what you kind of want right now. It's like hey, I want the 6-pack abs, but I also want the Snickers bar right now. And so like figuring out that balance, it probably is a little bit, do you have any advice for people on that, Keith? Like, how do you find that balance?
So first of all, I want people to recognize what's the difference between what happens between now and when I reach financial freedom. That's life. That's enjoying the journey. I would say probably one of the biggest mistakes I made is I was so caught up in my wealth building, especially in the later years, where I was not enjoying the journey. I was working crazy hours at a CPA firm. I eventually sold that firm, but my wife was really asking me to enjoy the journey. And I really wasn't. I was working all the time, and that ended up leading to some significant marital problems that we had to work through later. So for me, having that balance and finding time whenever you start getting depressed about having to spend too much time or it feels too difficult, that's probably not the time to do it. You probably need to reassess your journey. For me, financial freedom, I don't know that it was easy, but once you feel like, it's almost like you're training for a marathon and you're getting into shape. There's kind of that point where your legs are no longer itching and stuff just because you're just starting out, where you start to build the runner's high and you feel like you've got a little momentum. Once you're on that journey to financial freedom and you have some of those habits in place, it no longer feels like a sacrifice. You're enjoying it. You feel good about it. You're seeing yourself get closer to your vision, your goals. You're seeing that process. That's what can be a good fit. If you're having to sit home and eating beans and rice for dinner every night and you're not happy about it, then that's probably not a good fit. If you don't mind it and you like it, that's great. I just know some that have taken the path of extreme frugality and then realized they gave up 2 decades of their life and now they're supposed to start living. You don't want to always live for that someday that may never come.
Yeah. And man, we talk about that a lot in Lifeonaire, like putting off life till someday when. And so that's an interesting balance to strike. Like, what does that really look like in terms of not, and we always tell people, like, we're not asking anyone to deny themselves. We're simply suggesting and encouraging people to consider like what's most important. And finding that right blend or that right recipe for them is probably gonna be different from somebody else. But at the same time, it's that delicate balance between the present and the future that I think really allows people to kind of like do both ideally.
Yeah. And that's why it's got to be a custom wealth plan. That's what I like to work through. It's like, you can't, as Lifeonaire, you can't give everybody their vision. That's a different vision for each individual. Every person is just walking through people. How do they form their own wealth vision? What are their skills and resources to help form that? Where do they want to go? What kind of lifestyle do they want? And just really thinking through that, then building the plan in place to support their journey to financial freedom can actually be a really fun, enjoyable process where you're not feeling like you're having to sacrifice. It actually just, in time, once you have that plan, that financial freedom is an eventuality, not just an if.
Peter, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I hear from this conversation is what's really important is having that vision, clarity on that vision, and being intentional, right? Because I think what happens if you're not doing that, that's when you're just going about life and 10 years later, you're like wondering what happened, right? Do you have any examples of, maybe you work with someone, how you were able to take him from one place to another based on, having that vision and intentionality, like that somebody can kind of look at, okay, you know what, that makes sense.
So I'm working with a gentleman right now who's looking at quitting his job. There's certain things that people just know that they should or could do, but they want to hold on to that safety net often longer than they need to. And part of it is just helping people realize what they already have or how they can just move a couple pieces around on their board, and they suddenly, the end is in sight. Or there's another guy I'm working with too. He's selling his company and it's going to be an 8-figure sale by the time he's sold. And so taking somebody who's like, I've got all this money, but I've got no idea on how to invest it, and then helping them plug into some resources on how to find their own deal flow and into a community of other people trying to find the same great passive resources and sharing it. It's really helps everyone.
That's really cool, man. And I want to really kind of bring this back down to for someone who's maybe, I would guess that a number of our listeners either are at the stage of needing to make more money, and so that their income isn't where they would like it to be, or they have a sustainable income that they feel pretty good about, but they haven't built wealth yet. To the first group of people, if someone is still working on the income side and they're not making a whole lot of excess, should they be thinking about wealth, or should they be should they be concerned with making more income first and building a margin?
So there's a part of what I talk about in wealth, in the wealth theory, is there's a cycle where you go through what I call the cycle of compounding capital: conception, creation, conversion, cultivation, and collection.
A lot of C's there, man. A lot of C's. A lot of C's. Walk us through that.
So the first part is the conception. Is you need to know what you're doing and what's going to get you there. Once you have the concept, that's what's going to allow you to move forward to that next part. So a lot of people are probably in that creation phase. In the beginning part of your wealth building, you need to build capital. So if you have $100 and you're able to put a lot of time and energy and find a way to double your money each year, well, you went from $100 to $200. Maybe for all that time of energy, you could have taken a job somewhere and made a lot more money. So in the beginning, you're looking at ways to either generate cash to put into equity producing, equity growing cash flow assets. I'm twisting my words here.
So let me just pause you right there. So you're saying that if someone really needs to, and the way for them to build this capital is through income generating activities. This is not what you're talking about yet. This is in wealth. We're talking about the creation of the resource that we're going to later invest. Is that accurate? Did I understand that correctly?
That's accurate. Either creating the income, or you're somehow partnering or finding some way to get equity in assets.
Okay.
So there's all sorts of ways to do that, but the easiest way that most people do it is just building income, whether that's from a job or a business.
Okay. All right. So then what was after creation?
Conversion. So you're now converting these assets from income to some sort of investment. And there's all sorts of things to think about how to do that tax efficiently, whether you want to use a retirement account outside of that, how to reduce tax at conversion, et cetera. We could have a whole nother podcast about this. And then cultivation is a matter of growing and improving those assets. So if you bought a rental house or an apartment complex, how do you manage that? And then lastly, how do you collect either through the sale or the ongoing cash flow of that in such a way that is the most efficient while growing the greatest returns possible. And then you're reinvesting that back into that cycle.
So let me just reflect back what I heard. And so we generate income, which for capital. We use that capital then to find some sort of vehicle to produce cash flow for us. And now our money's working for us. At that point, now we start thinking about how to improve this process, like whether it's a value add, whether it's a management inefficiency, whether it's some sort of way to increase the ROI on that performing asset we have. Then at some point, we evaluate whether or not we want to sell this thing. And we look at the numbers. Hey, it's worth this much now, and we're only making this much. Is this the best ratio for us, or can we get a better return somewhere else? And at that point, you either decide to take that money, sell it, take the money and move on to some other asset, or if those ratios and everything's working well, you leave it there and just keep it maximized and optimized.
Yes, that's perfect. And then one other point I want to just finish these points off is we talked about building income in the beginning. And then there comes a point where you need to shift your focus. And this is the important shift that most people who are not focusing on their wealth as their business miss. The shift is somewhere about halfway through your journey towards financial freedom. You shift away from creating wealth to now managing your wealth, where you're trying to create the greatest ROI possible. So earlier I said, if you doubled your money at $100, it's not that great of a return. But if you have $500,000 or $1 million net worth and you double your money, that's huge. And so once you have $1 million net worth, if you work a year in a career, maybe you're making $100,000 or something, and that's great. But that's like a 10% return, which is still good. But if you're able to focus your efforts and almost quit your job or work less in your business or career and get a 15% return on your money, now suddenly you've had a much higher wealth value creation for your wealth.
That's it, man. That's a great point. And I guess, at some point, I guess most of your energy and focus is now on you're in the wealth stage, and now at some point, like that's where your focus needs to be, and how to kind of allocate that as well as maintain it. Like you said, one question that popped up as you were talking is like, how does somebody know when they're ready to start building wealth? Is there a number like, hey, you should really have $100,000 in the bank, or you should really have this much capital, or this much assets, or like, do you have to be an accredited investor? When does I know people need to start thinking about this, but when should they start acting on it? How does that transition look like?
I think the moment they have $1, if they're one and then get $1, they're probably not thinking too heavily about wealth concepts as a 1-year-old. But the moment you can do anything, I think you start setting things aside. Especially for young people, the greatest asset they have is time. So if somebody's only making a 5 to 7% return on their money with traditional investments, they'll still get to financial freedom eventually. That's great. But somebody who's in their 50s haven't worried about financial freedom, they're the ones that have to take some much bigger action steps, because they only have a decade or two before they need to retire. They're almost forced to retire.
Yeah.
So the sooner you can start building these habits and you can start making mistakes, you can do it while you're small. It'll be a huge impact later.
Man, one of the things that I've done so my daughter is 20 now, and for the last several years, I've been kind of shepherding her and teaching her these kind of concepts. And there's tons of one thing I've done is online you can just type in like investment return calculator, and you can say, hey, this is how much money, how often are you making contributions, what's the interest rate, tax, all this other stuff. And I showed her, and how long is, and one of the other variables is how long is this invested, and like it's staggering. When and I've seen these examples used over and over again from different people, but like it's staggering the compounding effect of time when it comes to investment returns. It's phenomenal. And basically I said, listen, you can have like, I don't remember what the number was, $3-4 million, but if you put in whatever, $5,000 a year and get like an 8% return or whatever the numbers were. But when she retires, and it was phenomenal. And I think certainly this is a place I think we do our youth an injustice. We're not sharing this, but also to your point, like this is as you get older, it's even more important if you're going to have wealth to start working on this more aggressively. And you may never catch up to if you started at 20, but you still got to do it. It's still there for you.
And I also want to point out, I love the example that you just gave. When you're first starting out, there are now investment vehicles out there where you can invest, I want to say as little as $10 in their funds. There's so many mobile, millennial friendly apps out there that are just intended for if you have something, you start investing. And so your greatest form of wealth building right now just comes from saving and putting it in something that's reasonably safe. And then as you grow and you become more sophisticated, you learn how to manage your wealth and you have something to manage. That's where you can start doing some of these larger deals out there, and you've got something to invest even more substantially as that's grown.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, Keith, this has been phenomenal. I really, really appreciate you being on the Lifeonaire show. How do people learn more about what you do or get in touch with you?
Sure. People can go to my website, financialjourney.life, and connect with me there, or my email, keith@financialjourney.life. I'd be happy to answer any questions people might have.
Awesome, man. Thanks for being on the show, Keith.
All right, man. Well, this was a great episode. I'm hoping that from this particular episode, when we talked about what and everything, maybe that whole midlife crisis that you have going on is kind of going away. Is it?
So maybe I should be worried more about my wealth than a minivan.
I think so. Yeah. No, but one of the biggest takeaways that I've had from this particular episode is shift in thinking. How, a lot of people don't think about wealth that actually helps them in the long run, right? Most people, talk about intentionality and the vision and being focused, not only like being in the present moment to the choices that you make in the present moment, but looking in the long run, having that balance.
Well, the thing that struck me, man, is like, when he really talks about the difference between income and wealth. And so a lot of people get stuck in the income side of the equation and they never build wealth. And this happens whether or not you're making, $10 an hour or $1,000 an hour. Oftentimes it gets translated into nicer things and nicer bills and living conditions, but it doesn't really translate without what you mentioned, intentionality and the focus, like Keith mentioned, into a system of building wealth and a system of providing cash flow for you through your assets. So you're not working for the rest of your life. Like, so you can actually build wealth with the things that Keith mentioned. And I love the tips he gave. He said, focus. He said habits. He also alluded to systems, like make it automatic, find ways to systemize this approach towards money and towards wealth building. And also he said, being around other people that are doing this kind of things, being around the right kind of people. We talk a lot about this in Lifeonaire as well, being around people that are where you want to be. And so those three things are big.
Yeah, they are big. And we experience this when we do our, Lifeonaire 3-day giveaways, when we have people coming from all different walks of life. And in reality, what we just discussed pretty much applies to every single person that walks through that door, whether they don't have any money or they are multimillionaires, right? And one thing that is really important to knowing yourself as a human being, right? How you operate in life, and then taking those steps to actually prevent it from you, spending money or whatever it might be, and actually automating it is huge, right? Because then you don't think about it, you don't have to worry about it, and you wake up, a year later, 2 years later, 10 years later, and all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of wealth. Right. We don't put the steps to just go into that.
Well, along those lines, he also talked about the importance of knowing yourself in regards to what investment vehicle you choose. And so if you're a people person, maybe you're going to be the one who's going to be negotiating deals, or be the one to syndicate deals and get, introduce Paul and Mary as investors and syndicate things. Or if you're an analytical person, maybe you're running the numbers. And so finding those strengths within that, within that framework of what you are good at, have time for, have an interest in, all of these things plays into that. The one thing we didn't talk about that struck me as we were discussing this just now, is that even if you build wealth, there's probably a good chance you're still going to want to work, right? You're still going to want to generate an income on your own, because I think we're designed for work. And so even if you have tremendous wealth, now, of course, you have more options, you have more choices. You'll likely find something that you actually love and you find fulfilling and meaningful. But I don't think it's about just retiring on a beach somewhere and, you're wealthy, but you don't do anything. You're not a productive contributor to society. I don't think that's the lesson here. I think it's just to give you options, to give you security, to give you a level of ability to do the things you want in life without as much of a concern for money and generating an income.
Yeah, and then what it ends up coming down to is getting to do what you do as opposed to having to do what you do.
Right.
I mean, I get to do this as opposed to have to do this. So I think that conversation that we just had with Keith is the conversation where you get to do stuff as opposed to having to do stuff. And when you start looking from that perspective and looking at that vision, remember we talked about the vision in life, right? How much did he mention about the vision? It's not so much there has to be a Lifeonaire vision, which works, right? But having the vision for life, it's so important to be able to get that wealth creation, financial freedom going for you.
Yep. So awesome episode. Thanks everyone for listening. Listen, if you would like to be part of the conversation, we have our Lifeonaire app. You can go download it wherever you get your apps. Keith is actually in there as well. So if you want to interact with Keith, I see him posted in there quite frequently. You can also find the desktop version of that over at lifeonaire.com and join the Lifeonaire conversation. We also have a free gift for you. It is a Lifeonaire Fast Start Kit. So you can learn more about the principles and philosophies and strategies that we teach within Lifeonaire, and that is free for you. Also, if you've enjoyed these podcast episodes, we would love for you to leave us a review and subscribe. And so that way we can reach more people. We can make sure we pop up every time there's a new episode. You'll get a notification so you don't miss anything. And as always, we are very grateful for you listening. Hope you find value and enjoy the episodes. Until next time, everyone, live free.
And by the way, if you feel like you need to do an intervention, go on the app and send it out to Wojo, because we don't want him to live in a van down by the river.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.